Whether you're flying across the world in Microsoft Flight Simulator, swinging across Manhattan rooftops in Marvel's Spider-Man, or exploring the open world of Red Dead Redemption 2, one thing these games have in common is their stunning graphics. It's hard to believe how much video game graphics have evolved throughout the years, especially when we consider that the extremely limited visuals were from just 50 years ago. So how did we get to the ultra-realistic graphics and expansive worlds we see in games today? This is the evolution of video game graphics. Let's go back to the early 1950s when the first video games appeared. The earliest known interactive game was the cathode ray amusement device in 1947. Yeah, this doesn't really look like a game, but rather a boring program you had to use in high school. In 1950, the first true game was released, a tic-tac-toe game called Bertie the Brain. The following year, the first gaming computer was made, the Nimrod. The main focus wasn't the entertainment, but rather to prove computers could carry out very complex practical problems. It wasn't until 1958 that the first game, simply for entertainment purposes, was built. The game was Tennis for Two, and it became an instant sensation with hundreds of visitors waiting in line to play the game during its debut. The tennis game was one of the earliest games to feature moving graphics. Another worthy mention during the early days of video game development is the 1962 video game Space War. This game was developed by Steve Russell and some other people at MIT on a PDP-1 mini-computer. In the game, two players fight each other to try to destroy each other's spaceship. Not only was it very popular, but it was also considered one of the most important games in early video game history. It inspired many other games, such as Computer Space and Space Invaders. Fun fact: did you know that the original Space War is still playable at the Computer History Museum? Not only is it the original game, it is also still playable on the PDP-1 computer. Up until the 1970s, computers were still very expensive and only a few people could afford them. For instance, the PDP-1 cost about $120,000 or over $1 million today when adjusted for inflation. Because of this, only a lucky few were able to play games. However, the video game industry transitioned into a new era with the introduction of the first commercial arcade video game, Computer Space, in 1971. The developers, Nolan Bushnell and Ted Dabney, created large cabinets on which people could play the game. The two developers founded Atari and launched the famous Pong video game in 1972. Pong became the first commercially successful video game, and it helped to establish the video game industry. At the same time, the first home console was developed, the Magnavox Odyssey. During this era, many other consoles were created, including the Atari 2600, which we extensively feature in the evolution of Atari. Many new and simple games were developed for this console, including Combat. But then, the golden age of arcade games began with the release of Space Invaders in 1978. Video game graphics significantly improved from the basic lines, dots, and blocks commonly found in most games before that period. Fun fact: Space Invaders was a huge commercial success. The game had a net profit of $450 million, which is equivalent to over $1.3 billion today, making it one of the most successful games of all time. Almost at the same time, RGB color graphics were becoming more popular, allowing for animated multicolor sprites. In 1979, Galaxian was released and became one of the first games to feature RGB color graphics. Unlike most video games before that time with static backgrounds, Galaxian also had a scrolling effect. Another significant development in video game graphics during this period was the introduction of vector graphics. Popular games used these vector graphics, including Asteroids, a space-themed shooter released in 1979, and Star Wars, released a few years later and was praised for being one of the greatest video games at the time. At the end of the golden age of arcade games, colored graphics had become the norm in almost every video game. Games like the popular 1980 Pac-Man would not have been the same without these important, colorful graphics. Fun fact: Japanese video game designer Taru Iwatani wanted to invent a game that would revolutionize the video game market. While out with friends, he ordered a pizza. Due to the lack of appetite, he only cut off a slice. Suddenly, the designer thought of the pizza as a game character. In his imagination, it looked like a creature that needed to eat. And that is how Pac-Man was born. The golden age of arcade games came quickly to an end with the video game crash of 1983. Revenues of the video game industry peaked at around $3.2 billion, then fell massively to around $100 million by 1985, which is a drop of almost 97%. The crash was attributed to several factors. One of the most important ones was the poor quality of game titles that were released. However, one of the games that was still very successful despite the crash was Nintendo's Donkey Kong. The game was praised for its graphics, animations, and characters, which gave the game somewhat of a story. The Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES, was incredibly important in reviving the video game industry. Game graphics quickly became more appealing during the mid and late 1980s as sprite technology continued to improve. This can be seen in games that were released during this period, including Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy, and Street Fighter. At the end of the 1980s, 2D graphics had improved significantly, and game developers started experimenting with 3D graphics. CD-ROM was also introduced as storage, allowing developers to store more data. Although the early attempts of creating 3D graphics resulted in an imitation known as pseudo-3D or 2.5D graphics, most of the games released during this period were more colorful and had satisfying gameplay. One of these games was Street Fighter II, released in 1991. One of the methods used by developers to achieve pseudo-3D graphics is known as parallax scrolling. This technique is used to create a sense of depth by making the different layers of the background move independently of each other at different speeds. Images far away in the background move much slower than images in the foreground. I often use this technique in my animations to give them a more 3D feel. Examples of popular games with 2.5D graphics include The Sims, Diablo, and of course, Sonic the Hedgehog. Fun fact, Sonic could have had a very different name. Originally, the suggested name was Mr. Needlemouse. Starting from the mid-1990s, most video games transitioned fully into using 3D graphics. In 1992, Virtua Racing was released, and it is considered one of the first video games to use 3D graphics. Another worthy mention during these early days of 3D graphics is the 1993 Doom. This game instantly popularized the first-person shooter genre. It was also one of the first to feature multiplayer capabilities. The 3D revolution was fueled by intense competition among video game companies to create more powerful consoles. With the introduction of the PlayStation in 1994, countless 3D games were introduced, including Gran Turismo, which was incredibly difficult to develop. Game designer Kazunori Yamauchi said, quote, "It took 5 years. In those 5 years, we could not see the end. I would wake up at work, go to sleep at work. It was getting cold, so I knew it must be winter. I estimate I was home only 4 days a year." All the hard work resulted in groundbreaking graphics and one of the greatest racing games ever released. In 2001, Grand Theft Auto 3 was released. With its impressive 3D graphics, it set a new benchmark for open-world games. Another significant game was Half-Life 2. It had very advanced physics, animation, sound, AI, and graphics for its time. During the early 21st century, we continued to see an unprecedented surge in technology, which led to games with expansive worlds and graphics more realistic than ever before. Gears of War was released during this period. IGN called it the most gorgeous-looking game on the Xbox 360. In 2007, Halo 3 was released, utilizing a proprietary in-house graphics engine, allowing for graphic technologies such as high dynamic range, global lighting, and motion blurring. In 2011, Skyrim had significant visuals for its time due to the Creation Engine, which allowed for a draw distance that renders further than any previous Elder Scrolls game. Dynamic lighting allowed shadows to be created by any object in the large, open-world fantasy game.
Dragonborn!
Crysis 3 was launched in 2013, and one of the major goals while developing the game was to push graphics. The CEO of Crytek said, quote, "Graphics, whether it's lighting or shadows, puts you in a different emotional context and drives the immersion." While PCs are generally known for having the highest graphics, the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, released in 2013, were a major step forward for game graphics on consoles, allowing for a new generation of games with much better graphics. One of the games for these consoles was The Witcher 3, released in 2015. It is considered one of the greatest games of all time due to its huge open world, plot, and graphics. Another game with impressive graphics that was released in the same year for both consoles was Star Wars Battlefront. Another worthy mention is Horizon Zero Dawn, which was released in 2017. It has a gorgeous and colorful open world filled with robotic creatures. The machines and world were inspired by BBC documentaries, which allowed for these amazing visuals. The game won multiple awards, including Best Graphics by IGN's Best of 2017 awards. Fun fact, before creating Horizon Zero Dawn, Guerrilla Games had only created the Killzone franchise. The studio wanted to create an entirely different game. So instead of a linear first-person shooter in a dark dystopian world, they created an action role-playing game with a colorful and beautiful open world. In 2018, multiple games were released that set a new benchmark for video game graphics. First, there was God of War. The franchise stepped it up by developing a gorgeous action-adventure game. Only a few months later, Marvel's Spider-Man was launched, allowing Spider-Man to swing through beautiful New York City. And there was, of course, Red Dead Redemption 2, which not only has phenomenal visuals, but also has many mind-blowing little details, such as Arthur's facial hair, which grows in real time. Game engines are incredibly important for the evolution of video game graphics. In 2020, Epic Games revealed Unreal Engine 5, which supports the next-generation PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. One of the major features of Unreal Engine 5 is Nanite, an engine that allows for high-detailed photographic source materials to be imported into games. To significantly improve the lighting, Lumen was created. It has dynamic lighting, and it allows light to bounce off other objects to create more realistic and beautiful scenes. Unreal Engine 5 allows for an unprecedented level of detail with an impressive draw distance.
Don't fail me now.
In 2020, Microsoft Flight Simulator was released. Let's just take a moment to appreciate how magnificent the game looks. This game is massive. In fact, it simulates the entire Earth using textures and data from Bing Maps. Microsoft partnered with Blackshark.ai, who used the groundbreaking technology of Microsoft Azure and artificial intelligence to analyze map data and generate photorealistic 3D models of objects. The game also has realistic physics and real-world weather data. This really is the future of gaming. In 2020, Cyberpunk 2077 was released, and it was one of the most anticipated games of all time. While the open world of Night City looks gorgeous, the game had a disastrous launch as a result of the bugs and performance issues. It even led to Sony removing the game from the PlayStation Store. Nonetheless, the game was praised for its visual quality, story, atmosphere of the world, and cyberpunk setting. Fun fact: players and fans create mods to modify games. These mods can make games incredibly realistic. Let's look at some of the amazing examples of modded games, such as Cyberpunk, Skyrim, Grand Theft Auto V, The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, and Red Dead Redemption 2. In 2021, Forza Horizon 5 was launched. For anyone who loves racing games, this truly is a dream come true. The scale of the game is significantly larger than its predecessors. Developers used photogrammetry data to make the environment look as close as possible to real-life Mexico. In late 2021, Unreal Engine 5 released a demo for the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S. The Matrix Awakens, an Unreal Engine 5 experience, is a boundary-pushing technical demo. It has a dense, open-world city environment, made out of billions of polygons, resulting in some of the most impressive graphics I've ever seen. Although the demo isn't a game, it offers a vision for what the future of interactive content could be, with incredibly rich and complex environments and photoreal cinematic spectacles.
You drive. I'll shoot.
And finally, a game that has yet to be released while making this video is the sequel to Horizon Zero Dawn, called Horizon Forbidden West. This game will be larger than its predecessor and will feature underwater exploration. It takes advantage of the PlayStation 5's increased processing power, custom SSD, 3D spatial audio, enhanced lighting, reduced loading times, and improved visual effects. These next-generation graphics look absolutely phenomenal. It is truly unbelievable how much video game graphics have improved over the years. The graphics we have today are exactly what my 12-year-old self dreamed gaming would be in the future. I've no doubt game graphics will continue to evolve, and I can't wait to see what the future of gaming will bring us.
But what form will it take? The journey ahead will reveal what you stand for.
We've made evolution videos about many games that were featured in this video, including Marvel's Spider-Man, Grand Theft Auto, Horizon Zero Dawn, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and more. If you want to see how these games evolved over the years, then click the playlist on the right.